I'm Sandra, 68 years old, living in my beautiful Beacon Hill mansion in Boston. For 35 years, I built my wealth as an investment banker, raising my only son Thomas, alone, after my husband died. We were so close until he married Natalie. She changed him completely. I never imagined my own son would grab me by the shoulders and throw me through a glass door. Before I tell you how my own son threw me through a glass door, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button to support other women who've survived family betrayal. My journey began in a modest neighborhood in South Boston. I wasn't born into money or privilege. Everything I have, I earned through determination and countless 16-hour workdays at Morgan Financial. I started as an administrative assistant and worked my way up to become one of the firm's top investment bankers. By 40, I was managing portfolios worth millions and had built my own substantial nest egg through careful investments. I met Richard Thomas's father during a financial conference in New York. He was brilliant, kind, and supported my ambitions when most men in the 1980s wouldn't. We married within a year, and Thomas came along 2 years later. Our life together was wonderful, but tragically short. When Thomas turned 10, Richard was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer. Within 6 months, he was gone, leaving me a widow with a heartbroken child. Those years were the hardest of my life. I had to balance my grief, Thomas's emotional needs, and my demanding career. There were nights I cried myself to sleep after tucking Thomas in, wondering if I could do it all alone. But for my son, I found strength I didn't know I possessed. I made sure Thomas had everything he needed, but I was careful not to spoil him. Even as my wealth grew substantially, I maintained a relatively modest lifestyle by the standards of my colleagues. Our home was comfortable but not extravagant until later in my career. Thomas attended good schools, but he also had chores and summer jobs. I wanted him to understand the value of hard work and not expect everything to be handed to him. Money that comes too easily goes just as easily, I told him repeatedly. You need to build your own success. Thomas grew into a handsome, intelligent young man. He graduated from Harvard Business School and secured a position at a respected financial consulting firm. I couldn't have been prouder. He seemed to have absorbed all the values I tried to instill in him, and we maintained a close relationship, even as he built his own life. When Thomas was 35, he met Natalie at a charity gala I had helped organize for children's cancer research in memory of his father. Natalie worked in public relations for the foundation. She was stunning, charming, and seemed genuinely interested in our family story. Your mother is incredible, she told Thomas within my earshot. To accomplish what she has while raising you alone, she's an inspiration. I was touched by her words and welcomed her into our lives. When Thomas proposed 6 months later, I was thrilled for him. Natalie seemed perfect, intelligent, and ambitious, with a successful career in P. The wedding was beautiful, and as my gift, I provided the down payment for their first home, a lovely colonial in Brookline. The first 2 years of their marriage seemed idyllic. We had Sunday dinners together, often celebrated holidays as a family, and even vacationed together in the Berkshires. Natalie was attentive, always asking about my investments and career stories. I enjoyed our relationship and thought I had gained a daughter. What Thomas and Natalie didn't know was that I had been working with my attorney, Frank Matthews, on comprehensive estate planning since Thomas turned 30. I had amassed substantial wealth, much more than my lifestyle suggested, nearly $22 million in various investments, properties, and retirement accounts. I established a trust fund for Thomas that would mature in stages as he grew older. My plan was to reveal the extent of my wealth gradually as he demonstrated financial responsibility. I had seen too many families torn apart by sudden wealth, and I didn't want money to change our relationship or undermine Thomas's work ethic. When the time is right, I told Frank during one planning session, when I know Thomas is mature enough to handle it responsibly, I'll tell him everything. In retrospect, perhaps my secrecy was a mistake, but I genuinely believed I was protecting my son and our relationship. I had no idea that my silence would eventually become my greatest defense. The changes were subtle at first, so subtle I almost convinced myself I was imagining things. Thomas started canceling our standing Sunday dinners, always with reasonable excuses, work commitments, plans with Natalie's family, a weekend getaway they couldn't postpone. "Rain check, Mom," became his standard response, delivered with an apologetic smile that never quite reached his eyes. When we did get together, Natalie increasingly controlled the conversation. She'd interrupt when I tried to speak with Thomas alone, or change the subject when family memories came up. She seemed particularly uncomfortable when Thomas and I reminisced about the years when it was just the two of us. "Ancient history," she'd say, with a dismissive wave. "Let's talk about now." Around the 3-year mark of their marriage, I noticed troubling signs about their finances. Despite their combined annual income of over $300,000, they seemed to be constantly stretching themselves thin. Thomas arrived in a brand new Audi one day, while Natalie was sporting designer clothes and jewelry that I knew were well beyond their budget. When they invited me to their home for dinner, I was shocked by the extensive renovations, complete with custom Italian kitchen cabinets and marble countertops. The furniture was all new and obviously expensive. "Do you love what we've done with the place?" Natalie asked, clearly proud. "The interior designer I hired is absolutely brilliant." "It's beautiful," I replied carefully, "but it must have cost a fortune. Are you two managing okay financially?" Thomas laughed uncomfortably. "We're fine, Mom. We work hard. We deserve nice things." Natalie shot him a look I couldn't quite interpret. "Actually, we were thinking about a vacation property, something on Cape Cod for summers. Thomas mentioned you might want to help us with that." I was taken aback. I'd never discussed anything of the sort with Thomas. "I think buying a second home right now might be overextending yourselves," I advised gently. "Property taxes, maintenance, insurance, it all adds up quickly. Maybe in a few years, when you've built up more savings." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Natalie's smile tightened. "Well, we wouldn't need to worry about that if certain people were more generous with their resources," she said lightly, but with an unmistakable edge. Later that evening, as I was retrieving my coat from their bedroom, I overheard them in the hallway. "Your mother lives in that mansion, all alone, has all that money sitting around, and won't help us," Natalie hissed. "She's holding us back, Thomas. We deserve more than this." "She's always been careful with money," Thomas replied, but his defense sounded weak. "That's how she built her wealth. And what good is it doing anyone? She'll be dead in 20 years, and then we'll get it anyway. Why make us wait when we could enjoy it now?" I froze, coat in hand, heart pounding. I'd never heard anyone speak so callously about my death, let alone someone I'd welcomed into my family. What shocked me even more was that Thomas didn't object to her words. Over the following months, Thomas grew increasingly distant. He rarely called unless he wanted something, and our one-on-one lunches stopped completely. Natalie was always there, like a sentinel, monitoring our interactions. At one family gathering, I overheard Natalie telling Thomas's cousin that I lived like a miser despite my money, and that I was strangely secretive about my finances. The implication was clear. She thought I was hiding something, though ironically she had no idea how right she was. Despite these warning signs, I still hoped things would improve. Thomas was my only child, my heart. I couldn't bear the thought of losing him. So I maintained my silence about my wealth, still waiting for the right time, still hoping my son would return to the values I'd raised him with. I didn't realize then that the foundation of our relationship was already cracking beyond repair. As the months passed, the situation with Thomas and Natalie deteriorated further. Their financial problems became impossible to ignore. Thomas called one evening, his voice tight with stress, asking if I could loan them $40,000 to cover some unexpected expenses. "What kind of expenses?" I asked. "Just some credit card debt that got out of hand," he answered vaguely. "We've had a few unexpected bills." I suggested they speak with a financial advisor, instead offering to connect them with someone at my former firm. "Taking on more debt isn't the solution, Thomas. You need to address the root problem." "We don't need a lecture, Mom," he snapped. "We need help." When I gently declined to provide the cash without more information, the conversation ended abruptly. The next day, Natalie called to tell me that Thomas was too upset to speak with me. 2 weeks later, Natalie lost her PR job. According to Thomas, it was due to company restructuring. But through mutual friends, I heard rumors of missed deadlines and conflicts with clients. Instead of looking for new employment immediately, Natalie decided to take some time to explore starting her own PR consulting business, which meant their household income was suddenly cut in half. Despite this, they maintained their lavish lifestyle. Social media posts showed them at expensive restaurants and taking weekend trips to New York. When I expressed concern, Thomas assured me they were managing just fine, though his frequent requests for financial assistance suggested otherwise. "Mom, can you chip in for the roof repairs? It's an unexpected expense. Would you mind helping with the property tax bill this quarter? It's higher than we expected." Each request came with the implication that I, as a mother with means, should naturally want to help my son. And in truth, I did want to help, but not by enabling financially irresponsible behavior. Instead, I offered practical assistance. "I can help you create a budget," or "let me connect you with my financial planner." These offers were consistently rejected or ignored. Natalie's resentment became increasingly obvious. At a family Thanksgiving dinner, she made a point of commenting on my jewelry. "That's a beautiful necklace, Sandra," she said, eyeing the modest pearl pendant Richard had given me on our 5th anniversary. "I'm surprised you don't wear more impressive pieces, given your career. Most successful investment bankers I know really enjoy showing off their success." "Material things have never been my priority," I responded calmly. She smiled thinly. "How convenient." The tension was palpable, and Thomas, who once would have defended me, remained silent. By the spring, Natalie had abandoned her consulting business idea and taken a lower-paying position at a smaller PR firm. Their financial situation worsened, and I later discovered they had refinanced their home to pay off credit card debt, effectively erasing the equity I'd helped them build with my down payment gift. My 68th birthday in June marked a turning point. Thomas and Natalie arrived an hour late to the small dinner I'd arranged at my favorite restaurant. They barely acknowledged the occasion presented me with a clearly last-minute gift card, and spent most of the evening checking their phones. When the bill came, Thomas made no move to reach for it, despite having always insisted on treating me on my birthday in years past. After that disappointing evening, I began hearing from mutual friends that Thomas and Natalie were spreading concerning rumors about me. According to them, I was becoming confused about money, unreasonably paranoid about spending, and possibly in the early stages of cognitive decline. These rumors were particularly painful, given my sharp mental state and lifelong financial acumen. They were clearly setting the stage to justify taking control of my assets. I'd seen this scenario play out with elderly clients during my banking career, and I never imagined my own son would attempt such manipulation. When longtime family friends began to distance themselves, I realized Thomas and Natalie were systematically isolating me, another classic tactic used against older individuals before financial exploitation. Despite my growing alarm, I maintained my composure and dignity. I documented every interaction, saved every text message, and kept detailed notes of concerning behaviors. I also scheduled an appointment with my doctor specifically to have my cognitive abilities formally assessed and documented as intact. Most importantly, I called Frank, my attorney of over 20 years. I need to discuss some protective measures, I told him. Things with Thomas have taken a concerning turn. Frank, who had known Thomas since he was a child, sounded genuinely saddened. I was afraid this might happen when you told me about his spending habits. What do you want to do? Nothing drastic yet, I said, but I want to be prepared. I need to protect myself legally. Frank advised me to document everything and to be extremely careful about any financial documents I signed. He also suggested installing security cameras at my home, which I did discreetly. Your estate plan already has protections in place, he reminded me, but we can add additional safeguards if necessary. I still hoped reconciliation would be possible. Thomas was my only child, and the thought of permanent estrangement was heartbreaking. But as Frank gently pointed out, hope needed to be balanced with pragmatism. Hope for the best, he said, but prepare for the worst. I had no idea how prescient those words would prove to be, or how soon the worst would arrive at my doorstep. The day that changed everything began ordinarily enough. It was a crisp Sunday in October, and I had spent the morning tending to my garden, preparing it for the approaching winter. I was planning a quiet afternoon with a new book when the doorbell rang unexpectedly around 2 p.m. When I opened the door, I was surprised to see Thomas and Natalie standing there. They hadn't visited my home in months, and they certainly hadn't called to announce their arrival. Thomas, Natalie, this is unexpected, I said, trying to keep my tone light despite my unease. We need to talk, Mom, Thomas said, his expression serious. Can we come in? I led them to the living room, noting how Natalie's eyes scanned my home appraisingly, as if conducting an inventory. Would you like some tea? I offered. We won't be staying that long, Natalie replied curtly. Once seated, Thomas cleared his throat uncomfortably. Mom, we've been thinking about your future, and we're concerned. My future, I echoed, already suspecting where this conversation was headed. Natalie leaned forward. Sandra, this house is far too large for a woman your age living alone. The stairs, the maintenance, the yard work, it's all too much. We've been researching some wonderful retirement communities. I appreciate your concern, I replied evenly, but I'm perfectly capable of managing my home. I have a service for the heavy cleaning and gardening keeps me active. Thomas shifted awkwardly. It's not just about the physical demands, Mom. It's about your security and well-being. These communities have medical staff on site and social activities. You'd be around people your own age. What went unspoken, but hung palpably in the air, was the value of my home. A 5-bedroom Beacon Hill mansion worth nearly $4 million in the current market. I have plenty of social activities and friends, I countered. And my doctor just gave me an excellent bill of health last month. Natalie's pleasant facade began to slip. Sandra, you're being stubborn. This house is a valuable asset that's just sitting here underutilized. It could be sold with the proceeds, providing for your care and perhaps helping your family as well. By family, you mean yourselves, I stated plainly. Her eyes narrowed. We are your family, your only family. And frankly, we've been carrying a lot of financial burden while you sit on this gold mine of a property. Natalie, Thomas interjected weakly, but she was just getting started. No, Thomas, she needs to hear this. Sandra, you've been selfish. You live alone in this mansion while we struggle with our mortgage. You have investment accounts gathering dust, while your grandchildren's college funds are practically empty. This was news to me. Grandchildren, are you expecting? I asked, momentarily distracted. Not yet, Natalie snapped. But when we do have children, they'll be your legacy. Doesn't that matter to you? I took a deep breath, maintaining my composure. What matters to me is that I worked hard for everything I have. This home represents decades of sacrifice and smart decisions. I have no intention of selling it to subsidize your lifestyle. Your lifestyle, Natalie mimicked sarcastically. What lifestyle? You pinch pennies like you're poor when we all know you're sitting on millions. It's pathetic, really. Natalie, Thomas warned, but with no real conviction. I turned to my son, hoping to appeal to the young man I had raised. Thomas, this is my home. I'm healthy, independent, and have no desire to move. I understand you're facing financial challenges, but selling my house isn't the solution. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of the sun I knew in his eyes, but it quickly disappeared as Natalie placed a hand on his arm. Tell her, Thomas. Tell her what we discussed. Thomas straightened his shoulders. Mom, we think it's time we took a more active role in managing your affairs. Your decision-making lately has been well concerning. Concerning? I repeated incredulously. In what way? You're becoming paranoid about money, he said, echoing the rumors I'd heard they were spreading. You refuse to help your own son when you have the means. That's not normal maternal behavior. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So because I won't give you unlimited access to my money, you think I'm mentally incompetent? Don't twist our words, Natalie interjected. We're trying to help you. By taking my home and my autonomy, that's not help, that's exploitation. Natalie's face contorted with anger. You ungrateful old woman! Do you know how many hours we've spent researching places for you? Planning for your care. Planning for my money, you mean? I corrected. She stood up abruptly. This is pointless. She's completely selfish, Thomas. Just like you said. I looked at my son, hurt beyond words. Is that what you think of me? That I'm selfish? Thomas couldn't meet my eyes. You've changed, Mom. You used to be generous, caring. Now you're just bitter and suspicious. I haven't changed, Thomas. But you have ever since you married her. That was when Natalie completely lost control. How dare you blame me? I've done nothing but try to be a good daughter-in-law to you, and you've rejected me at every turn. You've hoarded your wealth, refused to help us when we needed it, and now you're trying to turn Thomas against me. You've done that all on your own, I said quietly. Shut up, she screamed. Just shut up, you miserable, useless old woman. You're worth nothing to us like this. Nothing. Thomas finally stood up. Natalie, that's enough. Let's go. But instead of apologizing for his wife's outburst, he gave me a cold look. We're trying to help you, Mom. If you can't see that maybe you are losing your grip on reality. I want you both to leave, I said, standing my ground. Now. Natalie grabbed her purse. Gladly. Enjoy rattling around in this mausoleum alone. Because that's what you'll be alone. Thomas is done trying to have a relationship with someone who clearly doesn't care about him. As they moved toward the door, I followed, determined to have the last word. Thomas, I raised you better than this. I taught you to earn your way, not to covet what others have. He whirled around, his face flushed with anger. You taught me that family comes first, but clearly that was a lie. Your precious money comes first. That's not true, I protested, reaching for his arm. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Thomas grabbed my shoulders, his fingers digging painfully into my flesh. I saw a flash of something frightening in his eyes, something I'd never seen before, rage mixed with contempt. Get your hands off him, Natalie hissed. Thomas shoved me backward hard. I felt myself falling, arms flailing for balance that wouldn't come. Behind me was the decorative glass door that separated my entryway from the living room, a beautiful piece with etched flowers that Richard and I had chosen together decades ago. The sound of shattering glass was deafening. Pain exploded across my back and arms as I crashed through the door shards, slicing through my clothing and into my skin. I landed heavily on the wooden floor, surrounded by glittering fragments. For a moment, complete silence fell. I looked up at my son through a haze of shock blood streaming down my face and arms. Thomas stared back, horror dawning on his face as he realized what he'd done. Mom, he whispered, taking a step forward. Natalie grabbed his arm. Don't. She'll use this against us. She pulled him toward the front door. She's fine. Let's go. But she's bleeding, Thomas protested, that flicker of humanity briefly resurfacing. She'll call someone, Natalie insisted. We need to leave. Now. And to my heartbreak, Thomas allowed himself to be led away. The front door slammed shut, leaving me alone on the floor, surrounded by broken glass and broken trust blood pooling beneath me. In that moment of absolute betrayal, I made a decision. As I pressed a nearby decorative towel to my bleeding arm, I felt a strange calm settle over me. They had shown me exactly who they were. Now, it was time to show them exactly who I was, the woman who had built an empire from nothing, who had faced every challenge life threw at her, and emerged stronger. I would not cry, I would not break, and I would not remain silent any longer. After the front door slammed shut, I lay among the shattered glass for several minutes, my mind struggling to process what had just happened. My own son had thrown me through a glass door. The physical pain was intense, but the emotional agony was unbearable. Finally, self-preservation kicked in. I carefully pushed myself up, wincing as glass fragments fell from my clothing. Blood was dripping steadily from several cuts on my arms, and I could feel warmth trailing down my face from a gash on my forehead. Looking down, I saw my clothes were torn and stained crimson. Using the wall for support, I made my way to the kitchen and called 911. The dispatcher's voice was calm and reassuring as she promised to send an ambulance immediately. "Ma'am, is the person who injured you still in the house?" she asked. "No," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "They've left." "And who was it that hurt you?" I hesitated only briefly. "My son." While waiting for the ambulance, I managed to pick a few larger glass fragments from my arm and wrap a kitchen towel around the worst bleeding cut. My hands were trembling, but my mind was becoming surprisingly clear. The EMTs arrived within minutes, their expressions grim as they assessed my injuries. "You're going to need stitches," one told me, as they helped me onto the stretcher. "And we should check for concussion and internal injuries. Falls through glass can be very dangerous, especially for someone your age." At the hospital, a concerned emergency doctor examined me thoroughly as a nurse gently cleaned my wounds. "Mrs. Wells, these injuries are consistent with an assault," the doctor said quietly. "Would you like me to contact the police?" I closed my eyes briefly. "Not yet." The doctor looked troubled. "Mrs. Wells' elder abuse is a serious matter. If a family member did this to you—" "I understand," I interrupted. "And I will address it, I promise. But I need to handle this my way." After receiving 23 stitches across various cuts, undergoing a CT scan to rule out head injuries, and having a tetanus shot, I was released with strict instructions for wound care. The hospital social worker provided me with resources for elder abuse victims and urged me to reconsider filing a police report. "I appreciate your concern," I told her, "but I have my own support system and a plan." It was nearly 9 p.m. by the time a hospital-arranged taxi brought me home. Stepping back into my house was surreal. Dried blood stained the wooden floor where I had fallen. Glass fragments still sparkled under the hallway lights. The beautiful door that held so many memories was now just an empty frame with jagged shards clinging to its edges. I stood there, staring at the destruction, and felt something inside me finally snap. Not my resolve, but the last traces of denial. The son I raised was gone, replaced by someone I no longer recognized, someone capable of physical violence against his own mother. I sank onto my living room sofa, and for the first time since the attack, allowed myself to cry. Deep, wrenching sobs tore through me as I grieved not just for my physical injuries, but for the death of the relationship I had cherished above all others. After about 20 minutes, I wiped my eyes and reached for my phone. It was time to call Judith, my oldest friend from college days, who lived just a few miles away in Cambridge. "Sandra, what's wrong?" she asked immediately upon hearing my voice. I told her everything, my voice occasionally breaking, but growing stronger as I reached the conclusion. "My God," she breathed when I finished. "I'm coming over right now. You shouldn't be alone." "You don't have to," I began. "I'm already getting my keys," she interrupted. "This isn't negotiable." While waiting for Judith, I called a 24-hour emergency cleaning service to deal with the glass and blood. Then I made one more call, this one to Frank's personal cell phone, despite the late hour. He answered on the third ring, his voice groggy with sleep. "Sandra, is everything okay?" "No, Frank, it's not. I need to activate all those protections we discussed." "Immediately." By the time Judith arrived, I had already emailed Frank photographs of my injuries and the damaged door. The cleaning crew arrived shortly after discreetly and efficiently, removing all evidence of the violence that had occurred. Judith gasped when she saw my bandaged face and arms. "Oh, Sandra," she whispered carefully, embracing me. "How could he do this to you?" "I've been asking myself the same question," I replied. "But what matters now is what I'm going to do about it." She stayed with me that night, making up the guest room, and checking on me periodically to ensure I didn't have a concussion. Around 3 a.m., unable to sleep, despite the pain medication, I found myself sitting at my kitchen table as Judith made us tea. I enabled this, I admitted quietly, by keeping my wealth secret, by always bailing them out of their bad decisions, by hoping Thomas would change without consequences. "Don't you dare blame yourself," Judith said firmly. "Nothing justifies what they did. I'm not excusing them, but I see my mistakes now, and I'm about to correct them." At 6 a.m., as dawn broke over Boston, Frank arrived at my door, looking grave but determined. He carried a briefcase full of documents, many of which we had prepared years earlier, hoping they'd never be needed. "I've been working since your call," he told me, his eyes widening at the sight of my injuries. "Everything is ready." I signed document after document, my signature steady despite everything. Power of attorney revocations, trust amendments, property liens. Each signature was a brushstroke in the portrait of justice I was painting. "Are you absolutely certain about this?" Frank asked as I signed the final document. "Once these are filed, there's no going back. The consequences for Thomas will be severe and immediate." I met his eyes without hesitation. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." Frank nodded, gathering the documents. "I'll have everything filed when the courts open at 9. The financial holds should take effect immediately thereafter, and they won't be able to stop it. Not a chance," he assured me. "The evidence of elder abuse is clear, and the protections we're activating are ironclad. By noon today, their financial situation will be very different." As he prepared to leave, Frank paused at the door. "Sandra, there's still time to file criminal charges. What Thomas did was assault." I shook my head. "The legal and financial consequences will be enough. I don't want to see my son in jail, despite everything." "You're more merciful than most would be," he observed. "It's not mercy," I corrected him. "It's self-preservation. A public trial would only bring more pain. This way, justice is served without more trauma." After Frank left, Judith helped me to the sunroom, where we watched the morning light spread across my garden. Despite my physical pain and emotional exhaustion, I felt a strange sense of peace settling over me. "What happens now?" Judith asked gently. "Now," I said, "we wait for them to realize exactly what they've lost." As it turned out, we didn't have to wait long. The wheels of justice, once set in motion, moved with surprising speed. By 10 a.m. that morning, Frank had filed all the necessary documents with the court and activated the financial protections we'd established. What Thomas and Natalie didn't know was that my legal team had prepared for this scenario years ago, with mechanisms designed to protect my assets from exactly this kind of exploitation. The first consequence hit around 11:30 a.m. when Thomas attempted to use his credit card at a gas station and found it declined. What he didn't realize was that the card was actually issued through one of my business entities, with me as the guarantor, an arrangement set up years earlier to help him establish credit after college. With one signature, I had revoked my guarantee and frozen the account. The second blow came shortly after noon, when Natalie received a call from their bank. The mortgage payment that was supposed to process automatically had been rejected. The reason: the property had a new lien filed against it that morning. What they didn't know was that their house was actually owned by one of my investment LLCs, with them as beneficial occupants, but not legal owners, another arrangement created to help them afford a home in an upscale neighborhood. The down payment I'd given them wasn't just a gift, it was structured as an investment that gave me certain legal rights to the property. By 1 p.m., Thomas had tried calling me 17 times. I let each call go to voicemail. Natalie had called 11 times, leaving increasingly frantic and then threatening messages. "What did you do?" her first message demanded. "Fix this immediately." By the fifth message, her tone had changed. "This is illegal. We're going to sue you for everything you have." The final message was simply incoherent screaming and threats. Around 2 p.m., as Judith and I were having a quiet lunch, Frank called with an update. "The trust lockdown is complete," he reported. "Thomas's access to all family trusts has been permanently revoked based on the elder abuse provisions. The property lien is in place, and the credit guarantees have all been withdrawn." "What about their bank accounts?" I asked. "Since their primary accounts were joint accounts with you as a secondary signatory, those have been frozen pending investigation of financial elder abuse. They'll be restricted to withdrawing no more than $500 per day for basic necessities." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "And they have no legal recourse." "None that would succeed," Frank assured me. "The documentation of your injuries, combined with the hospital report suggesting elder abuse, gives us an airtight case. Any judge would rule in your favor." At 3:30 p.m., I finally answered Thomas's call. Frank had advised me to have him on the line as a witness, so I put the call on speaker. "Mom," Thomas said immediately, his voice a mixture of anger and panic. "What have you done? Our accounts are frozen. The mortgage payment bounced. My cards aren't working." "I've protected myself," I replied calmly. "From you and Natalie." "Protected yourself?" he sputtered. "From what?" "From the son who threw me through a glass door yesterday," I said, my voice steady, despite the pain that lanced through me at the memory. "From the daughter-in-law who called me useless and left me bleeding on the floor." There was a moment of silence before Thomas spoke again, his voice smaller. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I lost my temper." "Put Natalie on the call," I instructed. "She should hear this too." There was a shuffling sound, and then Natalie's voice came through tight, with barely controlled rage. "Whatever you've done, you need to undo it immediately. You have no right to interfere with our finances." "Actually, I have every right," I corrected her. "Frank, would you explain?" Frank cleared his throat. "Mrs. Wells has activated the elder abuse protections in her estate plan, based on the documented physical assault and the pattern of attempted financial exploitation. All trusts, property, interests, and financial guarantees have been permanently revoked." "What are you talking about?" Thomas demanded. "What trusts? What property interests?" "The $22 million family trust," Frank said matter-of-factly. "The ownership structure of your home. The business entities that guaranteed your credit lines. All of those have been under Mrs. Wells's control, and all have now been permanently placed beyond your reach." There was complete silence on the other end of the line. $22 million, Thomas finally whispered. "Mom, you have $22 million. $22,400,000, to be exact." I confirmed. "The wealth I built over my career, which I was planning to share with you when I believed you were responsible enough to handle it. That day will never come now." Natalie found her voice. "You've been hiding this from us while we struggled, while we begged for help." "I wasn't hiding it," I replied. "I was protecting it. And yesterday proved exactly why that was necessary." "This is a misunderstanding," Thomas said quickly. "Mom, we can work this out," I'm sorry about what happened. I truly am. I never meant to hurt you. Yet you did hurt me. 23 stitches worth of hurt. We'll get counseling, he promised desperately. Family therapy, whatever it takes. Natalie interrupted him. Don't beg, Thomas. She's bluffing. She can't just cut us off like this. We have rights. Frank spoke up again. Mrs. Greenfield, you have no legal rights to Mrs. Wells's assets. The documentation of elder abuse, both physical and financial, has triggered provisions that permanently exclude you and Mr. Wells from any inheritance or financial support. Furthermore, any attempt to contest this will trigger the filing of criminal charges for assault and battery against Mr. Wells. You planned this, Natalie accused, her voice shaking with fury. You set us up. No, I said firmly. I protected myself from exactly the scenario that unfolded. You both showed me who you truly are yesterday. I'm simply responding accordingly. Mom, please, Thomas begged, and for a moment I heard echoes of the little boy who used to come to me with skinned knees and broken toys. We can fix this. Tell me how to make it right. The maternal part of me wavered, but then I touched the bandage on my forehead, felt the stitches pull as I moved, and remembered the look in his eyes as he threw me through that door. There is no fixing this, Thomas. Some broken things can't be repaired. You'll regret this, Natalie hissed. You'll die alone, you spiteful old witch. I'd rather die alone with my dignity than live surrounded by people who value me only for my money, I replied evenly. Goodbye, Natalie. Goodbye, Thomas. I ended the call and sat in silence with Frank and Judith. The weight of finality hung in the room, heavy but strangely liberating. Are you okay? Judith asked gently. I considered the question carefully. My body ached from my injuries. My heart ached from the loss of my son. But beneath those pains was a bedrock of certainty that I had done what was necessary to protect myself and my legacy. No, I answered honestly, but I will be. The physical wounds healed faster than the emotional ones. Within a few weeks, the stitches were removed, leaving thin, red lines that would eventually fade to silver. The deeper wounds, the betrayal, and heartbreak, those would take much longer to heal, if they ever truly did. In the immediate aftermath, I found myself cycling through grief, anger, and guilt. There were nights I lay awake, wondering if I could have prevented this outcome somehow. If I had been more open about my wealth, if I had set different boundaries, if I had recognized Natalie's toxic influence sooner. You're doing it again, Judith observed during one of our regular lunches about a month after the incident, blaming yourself for their actions. It's hard not to wonder, I admitted. He's still my son. The son you raised wouldn't have thrown you through a door, she said bluntly. That was someone else, someone shaped by greed and entitlement. I knew she was right, but the mother's heart is not easily silenced. I sought help from a therapist specializing in family trauma and elder abuse. Dr. Levine helped me understand that my feelings were normal, that grief for a living person can sometimes be more complex than mourning the dead. You're grieving the son you thought you had, she explained, the future you imagined, the relationship you valued. It's a profound loss. 3 months into therapy, I attended my first support group for parents estranged from adult children. The stories I heard there were heartbreakingly familiar tales of manipulation, exploitation, and betrayal by the very people these parents had devoted their lives to raising. It was both painful and comforting to know I wasn't alone. The hardest part, confessed Martha, a 73-year-old former professor, is the birthdays, holidays, all those times when the absence feels most acute. There were nods around the circle. We all understood the empty chair at the table, the unsigned cards, the silence on days that should be filled with family and celebration. As winter turned to spring, I began to reconnect with old friends I had neglected during the years. I focused primarily on Thomas and his family. I joined a book club, volunteered at the Children's Hospital, where Richard had been treated, and even took a watercolor painting class I had always been too busy for. Slowly, I built a life rich in meaningful connections that had nothing to do with financial obligations or family duty. Frank remained a steadfast presence, not just as my attorney, but as a friend who had known me through decades of life's ups and downs. 6 months after the incident, he suggested it was time to completely restructure my estate plan. "If not Thomas, then who?" he asked gently. "Who do you want to benefit from your legacy?" The question led me to one of the most rewarding decisions of my life. With Frank's help, I established the Wells Foundation for Family Reconciliation and Elder Protection, dedicating the bulk of my estate to supporting both preventative programs for family conflict and resources for elders who had experienced abuse. "This feels right," I told Frank as we finalized the paperwork. The something good coming from something painful. Around this same time, I received an unexpected piece of news from a mutual acquaintance. Thomas and Natalie had divorced. According to our friend, the financial crisis, triggered by my legal actions, had revealed deep cracks in their relationship that quickly became unbridgeable chasms. Without the prospect of my wealth to unite them, they had nothing left. I felt no satisfaction at the news, only a quiet sadness for all that had been lost. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived from Thomas, the first direct communication since our phone call 6 months earlier. "Mom," it began simply, "I don't know if you'll read this, and I wouldn't blame you if you threw it away unopened, but I need to tell you how deeply, profoundly sorry I am for what I did." The letter continued for pages, detailing his shame, his regret, his journey through therapy, to understand how he had allowed himself to become someone capable of hurting his mother. He explained how Natalie's influence had gradually changed him, how the promise of wealth had corrupted his values, and how losing everything had finally forced him to see the truth. "I don't expect forgiveness," he wrote near the end. "I don't deserve it. But I hope someday you might be willing to meet with me, even just once, so I can apologize to your face, and you can see that I am trying to become a better man, the kind of son you raised me to be." I read the letter 7 times over the next week, analyzing every word, searching for sincerity or manipulation. I discussed it with Dr. Levine, with Judith, with my support group. Opinions were divided. Some thought it was a genuine attempt at amends. Others suspected an angle to regain access to my wealth. After 3 weeks of consideration, I wrote back with a simple message. I would meet him at a public restaurant for lunch, with no promises beyond that one meeting. The day of our meeting, I arrived early, choosing a table with clear sight lines to the exits, still cautious, despite the months that had passed. When Thomas walked in, I barely recognized him. He had lost weight, his face leaner and more somber. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by simple, clean attire. His eyes, when they met mine, held a humility I hadn't seen since he was young. "Mom," he said softly, standing awkwardly by the table, clearly unsure if he should attempt a hug or even a handshake. "Thomas, I acknowledged, gesturing to the chair across from me. Please, sit. That lunch was one of the most difficult conversations of my life. Thomas apologized repeatedly, often fighting tears. He explained his journey over the past months, the therapy, the divorce, the minimum wage job he had taken to support himself after losing everything. I hit rock bottom, he admitted, but it was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to see what I had become. I listened more than I spoke, watchful for signs of the manipulation I had grown to recognize. But all I saw was genuine remorse and a painful awareness of all he had destroyed. I don't expect to be part of your will again, he said toward the end of our meal. I don't expect financial help or trust. I forfeited those when I hurt you. I just want a chance someday to have some kind of relationship with my mother again, even if it's limited, even if it's always supervised. Anything would be more than I deserve. As we prepared to leave, I finally shared my decision, one I had made before arriving. I'm willing to try family therapy, Thomas. Together, once a week, for at least 6 months. After that, we'll see. The look of surprised hope on his face was almost childlike. Really? You'd do that after everything? I'm not promising reconciliation, I clarified. I'm promising an opportunity to do the work. It will be hard, painful work for both of us. And my conditions are non-negotiable. Complete honesty continued, individual therapy for you, and no expectations of financial support ever. I understand, he said quickly. Completely. Thank you for even considering it. We parted with an awkward, brief hug, the first physical contact since the assault. As I watched him walk away, I felt neither the blind trust of before, nor the burning anger of recent months, but something new, a cautious openness to possibility without expectation. The road ahead would be long and uncertain. Trust once shattered is rebuilt slowly, if at all. But I had learned something valuable through this painful journey, something I now shared with others in my support group and through the Foundation's work. Silence isn't always weakness. Sometimes staying silent in a moment of crisis, observing rather than reacting, can be the most powerful response of all. My silence, as I lay bleeding on that floor, had revealed the true character of those who claimed to love me. And my subsequent actions, not desperate words, had created consequences that spoke volumes. Every morning now, I look at the fading scars on my arms and see not just reminders of pain, but badges of survival marks of a battle I didn't choose, but ultimately won. They remind me that I am stronger than anyone, including myself, ever realized. If you've stayed with me through this difficult story, I hope it gives you courage. If you're facing family betrayal of your own, stand firm in your worth. Protect yourself without shame. And remember that family is ultimately defined not by blood, but by love, respect, and care. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who took advantage of your generosity? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe, and share to help others who might be silently suffering similar situations. Thank you for listening, and remember, your worth is never determined by those who fail to value you properly.